When you talk about top point guards in the NBA who distribute the rock, score, rebound at will, I know you talk Jason Kidd, I know we talk Ben Simmons, but you can't leave out Fat Lever. He joins Bally Sports Network today to talk all things basketball. What's going on, sir?
I'm hanging in there, man, and that's good company you talked about there for point guards positions. I like it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. When you look at the past, you were in the top 10 or are in the top 10 in the conversation as it relates to triple doubles in the NBA. Oftentimes when we talk about basketball, we often talk about the 90s, kinda. Michael was there, right? You talk about Shaq, you talk about, all of the guys that were popular. You talk about Magic Johnson, the 80s and the 90s, but they leave your name out for whatever reason. Do you feel slighted?
No, Scoop, I don't, because I know what I've done. I think most of the players that I played with, they know what we did and what I did to them and they did to me. And I think because of the social media outlets, the broadcasting, that everyone gets a chance to see it now. So I don't feel slighted. I just feel that TV, radio, social media was before its time. And so now when I even go out to speak to kids and do things, first thing I say, just Google me. And then they're able to look back and say, oh, I played you in a video game or something. So the slight is not there because the respect is.
When you look at Luka Doncic, you as a former Magic, or excuse me, as a former Dallas Maverick, does he remind you of anybody?
I always think about that because Mark Cuban still does a lot of great things for the former Maverick players, so I'll always congratulate Mark and everything that he does. But there's a guy there in Denver at the time or in Dallas when I played there, and his numbers retired, Derek Harper. Everyone knows him as the point guard, but the things that he was able to do, and he still does some broadcasting for the Mavericks, but he's one of those guys that really did a lot of everything, and I'm sure Luka has picked his brain because of the things that I see him doing on the court as he does some of the broadcasts. But Luka's one of those guys that we always look back, going back to the McDonald's Classics that were overseas, played European basketball from the NBA standpoint, that's been playing pro ball since he's 14. Mm-hmm. So he's not a young guy as we see him, even though he is young, he's so much more mature for his age than most of the guys coming out. We're seeing some of it here now, but I love him as a player. He has to score. He distributes when he has to. And that's what makes an overall good player on the basketball team, making your other teammates better. And that's exactly what Luka does for the Dallas Mavericks.
Mr. Lever, I remember seeing your poster legitimately hanging in my family's sneaker store on 125th Street in Harlem, and just always thought that you had the most interesting, you had the Lego blocks Denver Nuggets uniform on. You look, college, Mitchell and Ness is popular. You think of Alex English, but I was thinking of Fat Lever. What were the early days of Denver like?
I loved it. It was one of those places where it's a big city. And going back to when I first came into the league, I came into the league with the Portland Trail Blazers. Small town, but the only game in town. So I got a chance to see what it was like to be a big fish in a small pond. And then going to Denver, it prepared me for that big pond to the point where, we always tease Danny Shays about throwing his Halloween parties because everyone's like, what did the Denver Nuggets players give out for Halloween in comparison to what the Denver Broncos gave out for Halloween candy treats? So that's when the big city came into play. So I really enjoyed it. The fans, I love this. There's an old poster, since you brought up posters, of us wearing fur coats back in the day and doing a photo shoot. So those times were really dramatic, and being able to go back and do some broadcasting with Altitude or just to go back and do some community relations stuff, it always brings back a lot of great and fun experiences.
Tell me something. Ben Simmons, Philadelphia 76ers, gets criticized for lacking a jumper. In a lot of ways, it reminds me so much of Jason Kidd when they called him Asen Kidd because he lacked a J. When you look at Ben Simmons and you look at the criticism and compare it to your era, do you think that they put too much pressure on point guards to be scorers? Or do you kind of look at it as, as a point guard, do you guys have to be scorers, or do you look at it from an old school perspective, they got to be distributors?
Scoop, I look at this way that the game is played. You've got to dictate how the game is played. It's the ball's going to start with you. You have a game plan going into the game, and you have to be able to direct it. Whether it's going to be an up tempo, whether you're going to have to score, whether you're going to have to pass, whether you're going to have to play defense. And someone like Simmons, who's an overall great player, his defense goes unnoticed at times, but the offensive things is his lacking ability right now. Because when I watched him last year, the year before, I didn't realize if he was right-handed or left-handed. And being ambidextrous is one of those things that's a fault for you. But usually when you look back at guys that sign autographs with their left hand and they shoot with their right hands, that would throw you totally off because you don't expect that. So the developmental phase for Simmons to come in this summer is going to be to work on what does he need to work on himself. Because right now, it's all mental. It's mental right now, but as the summer goes along and he progresses working with the development guys that's with the 76ers, his own training staff, and I'm sure he's with Rock Nation, so they're going to make sure he gets the help that he needs to be that player that everyone expects him to be. And it's not all about shooting. You can do other things to keep yourself in the game, but you can't pass up a dunk because you're afraid to go to the free throw line. I don't care if you're shooting 50% from the free throw line or 90%. If you're in the game, you better be willing to take that chance. And I didn't think Ben Simmons was willing to take that chance during the playoff series.
A couple more questions. One, when you look at the Denver Nuggets, a team you played for, in the playoffs this season, they fell short. Their MVP and Nikola Jokic was outstanding. What is Denver missing?
This year they missed Jamal Murray, and everyone knows that, but everyone knows the injuries are part of the game. And then you got a guy like Jokic, unbelievable, deserving of MVP of this basketball season from the NBA. No ifs, ands, or buts. And he's one of those guys that is not the most talented player, but the most diverse player to be able to have on your team. And everybody wants to play with him. The only thing outside of Jamal Murray being there, Will Barton was out for part of the time. You lose guys like Plumlee and bring in guys like Aaron Gordon. And Aaron Gordon is one of those guys, and Michael Porter Jr., that is deserving to be starters. But when they are young or just coming into the team, it takes that adjustment time. And that was the biggest struggles that Coach Malone had with them, making sure everybody was happy with their minutes and doing what he wanted them to do on the defensive side, because he's a defensive coach first. And this team was putting up points on the scoreboard like we did in the old days. And they got away from the defense. And that's some of the things that you can build upon, especially once you know your nucleus, Jamal Murray, Jokic is going to be there. You got Monte Morris coming off the bench. You got other guys that's going to be a big part of the team as far as Michael Porter Jr. So with all that being said, tremendous year, ran up against a brainstorm and just hot Phoenix Suns to get knocked out of the first round.